Welcome back to Nurse Educators Now, the show that brings you practical strategies and fresh ideas to support your work in nursing education. I'm your host, Dr. Susan Sportsman, nurse educator and director of Collaborative Momentum Consulting. Today, we are exploring how AI-driven case studies can support competency-based education. Since all healthcare educators are increasingly using competency-based education to prepare students to use higher order thinking in their professionals' lives, this is a timely topic. Joining me is Ashley Allgood, a faculty at the Department of Health Services Administration at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. She is completing her PhD dissertation in medical anthropology this summer. So, of course, we're going to say congratulations to her for that accomplishment. And Ashley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, let's just jump right into this very interesting topic. My first question is that you and a colleague have developed a 7-step methodology for crafting case studies that target students' higher level thinking. Their work has been published in the Journal of Health Administration Education Summer 2024, in case you'd like to look that up. Can you tell us what experiences drew you to this project and what teaching learning problems you hope to address?
Absolutely. So in both nursing and health administration, we're preparing students for this complex real-world decision making, not just the idea of rote memorization. And so around the time that generative artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT and Claude and Copilot were entering classrooms, we've noticed a shift in the kind of assessments that were becoming vulnerable. Students could generate a credible looking essay in just a few clicks. And so that raised questions about how we evaluate critical thinking. And so as we were thinking and working, embedding more case studies seemed like a natural segue to help us tackle this and really bring out that critical thinking. Because case studies demand applied reasoning, ethical judgment, and context awareness, skills that AI struggle to replicate meaningfully. But as we know, writing case studies from scratch takes a lot of time. This project started as a way to streamline the work while preserving that rigor of competency-based education. And to build upon that even further, I know from my work and just working with our nursing colleagues, nurses have incredible stories. They've navigated this ethical gray zone. They've managed conflict on the fly. And they've made decisions in this impossible area where we have imperfections in information, and they've just been able to manage all of these situations. And so the problem really isn't a lack of material. It's translating those lived experiences into teachable cases. And so this process, we hope, helps bridge that gap.
Oh, that is a wonderful explanation. And you're right. All of us in healthcare do have all kinds of stories to tell that can be good for learning. And so I think you're wise to try to build upon that. Would you briefly describe this 7-step process and the benefits? You've talked a little bit about some of those, but if you could talk a little more, that would be great.
Sure. So this method helps faculty go from a competency or a story to a ready-to-teach case. It's clear, repetitive, and designed to really save some time. And so now I'll kind of walk through those 7 steps. So step 1, you choose the competency. We start with what we want the student to demonstrate, whether it's ethical reasoning, interprofessional collaboration, crisis communication. Let that be the anchor that drives you. And then step 2 is to write a few short scenes. They're the key moments in the case. They don't have to be polished, just vivid. You can pull from real experiences or even pop culture. One of my colleagues wrote a case based on Encanto, the Disney movie, to explore system dynamics in a family-run clinic. So you can pull inspiration from anywhere. And so that's step 2, where you write a few little short scenes. And then step 3 is you're sketching out the characters. You want to give them roles and motivations and even flaws. You want to make them human-like and aim to have perhaps 3 to 5 different characters in your story. And then students often connect better when the people in the cases feel real. So that's why I say give them flaws or give them the archetype that they're likely to see and talk to. And then step 4 is prompting ChatGPT one scene at a time. So a lot of these, when I say ChatGPT, it can be any of these AI tools. I know at my university, we are now a co-pilot organization. And so we have access to Copilot, but all of these tools can give you the same type of response. But you want to prompt one scene at a time. This gives you control over the narrative and helps kind of maintain your voice and the coherence. So you can give it a scene. Hey, we want to start in an ER, a really busy scene, and a patient is complaining about the wait time. And then you can start building from there. And you can have this back and forth in this conversation with the AI to help build out that scene. And then step 5 is refining the output. Once you have all of the scenes, you can start editing for clarity. You can start changing kind of that emotional tone and the flow. And here's where we encourage like adding red herrings, those extra little details that complicate the case, but aren't central. So these distractors make cases really rich and harder for AI to resolve, but make the learning stronger for students. It's in that ambiguity that students really start doing their deepest thinking. So you create the case, and then I go back in and layer other details that might be a little bit of a distraction, but create more of a rich conversation because we know healthcare is complex and there's all sorts of things that are being hit at one time. So that's that step where we're refining that output and that collaboration. And then step 6 is creating those discussion questions. So as we're in the classroom, we have students analyzing the case, but then we want a robust discussion about the case. And so you can generate a draft with your AI tool or write your own. And you can focus on prompts that ask students to kind of analyze and evaluate and make decisions as you're thinking about those discussion questions. And then the final step, as you do, you would cite and document the process. This helps reinforce that academic integrity. I save all the prompts, I archive the outputs, and then cite ChatGPT or whichever AI tool that I'm using, just like I would any other educational tool. And then the result is that case that is both rigorous and realistic, and you're still bringing the pedagogy and the insights into it. Your AI tool is just helping with that heavy lifting and that crafting and putting things together.
You spoke some about the time that is involved, and that's one of my questions because I hear people say, and I probably have said it as well, these case studies require commitment of time, and I think they're fun to write. But what do you say to faculty who are afraid they don't have the sufficient bandwidth in their day to write effective case studies?
Absolutely. That's the beauty of this method. It works with the time and the stories that you already have. So start with the situation that stayed with you. Maybe it's a breakdown in communication. Maybe it's that tough ethical call that you had to make. You don't need the full case, just sketch out what happened. And from there, you can use AI to help you draft those scenes, even test the dialogue and kind of flesh out some of those complications and those other pieces that you want to add on. And if the idea of like narrating and going through your lived experiences isn't your style, that's okay. You can draw from fables like classic literature or even TVs and movies. I have another colleague that has built a case around Sherlock Holmes to teach clinical reasoning. And so really the point is like you don't have to do this long iterative process by yourself. You can use this as a tool, and it can be layered. And when students are working through a sticky case that has ambiguity and all of these red herrings, the right path isn't obvious. They're having to engage and the highest levels of thinking. So I would say we're not outsourcing creativity. We're just using AI to make space for it.
Wow, that's a good way to say that. Would you say that the time frame of doing this is no more than, preparing any other kind of lesson, or is it more time, less time, more enjoyable? How would you describe that to somebody who's hesitant?
Right. I would say it's probably going to take you the same amount of time that you would craft interactive component of your lesson. When we're thinking about creating something from scratch, study or a simulation or whatever the activity is for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also think part of it is just getting in there and playing with it. You're not going to break one of these tools.
That's good to know.
And then as you kind of figure out your own style and the way that you talk to it, because it's really conversational and the way that it works for you, it'll certainly get faster. But I would say, the first time around, give yourself enough time that you would for another lesson.
Okay. Well, that doesn't seem too hard to manage when you put it in those terms. So that's good. I'm glad to know. In your article, you noted that ChatGPT excels at generating factual information, but has a limited ability to ignore irrelevant information, the red herrings you were talking about, or generate original insights. And I think that to me is really where we want to go for many things that we want students to learn. So how did you use this limitation to play into the development of this process?
So we really just leaned into that. It actually helps shape the strategy. So thinking about the fact that these AI tools right now struggle with nuance.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a straightforward case, it can often be summarized or answered by AI. But if you make a complex case with competing priorities or emotional subtext or these red herrings, they require human judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we encourage instructors, faculty to add kind of these layers of ambiguity, maybe like a delayed security response or a policy constraint or maybe a patient-family dynamic that clouds the decision. Those aren't just distractions. They mimic the real complexity of healthcare work. They they short circuit kind of AI's tendency to oversimplify. So we turn the tool's limitation into design strength. That's kind of one of the biggest takeaways of this project to us.
It seems so to me, and I think that's pleasing to me. We try to make sure that students have that clinical or professional judgment, whatever you want to call it, and yet that's the hardest part for a competent administrator or nurse or respiratory therapist to gain. So that's really an important point, I think. How do you respond to students who question your use of ChatGPT or another one of the AI platforms, given the controversy regarding academic honesty? Perhaps your students never complain, but I've had one or two that did. How do you respond to that?
Absolutely. So I kind of have an open dialogue and I tell students that my classroom is going to be a space for experimentation. And that includes how we use emerging tools like artificial intelligence. The technology is evolving faster than our syllabi can really keep up with. So we have to approach it with curiosity as well as clear boundaries. So I'm extremely transparent about how I use AI, especially with developing case studies. You'll see a citation at the end of every AI assisted case I write. That to me models the integrity, but it also invites students into an open dialogue about how they might use the tool responsibly. For example, if students are preparing for a debate or discussion in my class, I personally don't have an issue with them asking ChatGPT to poke holes into their argument. To me, that's a valid use, just like running through a practice case with a colleague. But if it starts to replace their own thinking or flatten out their ideas, we pause and we talk about why that's not a great use for the tool. So what I'm trying to model is this discernment. AI isn't banned, it's bounded. And I want students to leave my course not just knowing how to use the tools, but when not to use them.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. That I think is the hard thing. You mentioned put a citation at the end of your case study or whatever you're working on. Give our listeners some resources about how to reference these AI tools in your scholarly work.
Yeah, APA and several others have come out with kind of a guide. But what you'll do is you'll say what tool you're using, the year. You're also putting in, just kind of some of that basic information and kind of when you did it. And then I keep copies of my outputs in case if those were, say, going to go into publication. I would keep all of the outputs in a file, in a source, so that I could offer those to anyone that wanted to look at it, because these models do change over time. So in the reference, I also put in, like, if I'm using ChatGPT 4.0 or Claude 2.0, that's important because as these models change, the outputs change as well.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. And I think for beginners, that's important to know. Thank you for sharing your expertise with our audience, which, as you know, are primarily nurse educators. But all health professional programs have competencies related to interprofessional collaboration. This can be very difficult to execute in education. It's sometimes hard in actual practice as well. So this is slightly off our subject, but related, I hope. What is your recommendation for evaluating and teaching students to collaborate across healthcare disciplines when given that schedules and all kinds of things make that difficult?
It really does, but I like to try to make collaboration contextual. So rather than thinking about the abstract concepts, teach it through dilemmas that professionals face together. So, I mean, you could use this as a base for a case study. You could write a scenario where we had in healthcare, we're all focused on doing what's best for the patient, but we may be coming at a situation from a different lens. So, say a nurse, administrator, pharmacist, social workers all have different stakes. And then having them assigned to their future roles, what they're going to school for, and ask them to analyze the same situation, but from their professional lens, and then work together to find a solution. As the faculty, your rubric could include not just the outcome, what did they find, what did they do together, but also how well they listened, how well they negotiated and adapted. That communication, that role clarity, ethical reasoning, those are all the competencies we want to surface and really try to assess. And that kind of experimental analysis could be where collaboration becomes real and not really just performative in nature.
Thank you very much. That is a wonderful answer. And I believe that it's what we all need to be working on to be able to make healthcare smoother for faculty and for students and for patients. And all that is that ability to talk to each other and consider the roles. So thank you. That was wonderful. And I'm so glad that you joined us today, Ashley. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank our audience for tuning in to Nurse Educator Now. I hope this conversation gave you new ideas to incorporate AI into your classroom. It certainly did me. So we hope that you will please subscribe to the show and share it with a colleague. And for more free nursing education content, visit us at collaborativemomentum.com. Until next time, we hope that you will continue to do the important work that you are doing in nursing education. Thank you very much.